Good afternoon, friends in America. Good evening, friends in Eretz Yisrael. This is one of those small windows in the calendar year where we are just 6 hours apart from Israel. So it feels a little bit closer than usual. And we are joined today with the amazing Rebbetzin Sharon Ron and Ilana Gurevich from Israel. They live in and around Jerusalem. And I'll invite folks to introduce themselves and tell us what they would like us to know about them. But I wanted to say from my own personal experiences, I grew up in high school. I grew up in Richmond, Virginia, and during high school, my years there, Sharon's husband was the Rav. Rabbi Ron was the rabbi of my synagogue. And so I've known them both since I'm a teenager, and her kids, who at the time, I don't even know if they were all born. They weren't all born yet when we first met, have now grown up and are now adults, young adults. And so it's an amazing opportunity to be able to see somebody who is very much part of my own personal life, now being part of this professional life. And she's always been a role model for me personally. And now kind of in the professional space of allyship, she's competitive as an amazing ally to the LGBT community, particularly in the trans space. And this past, my last trip to Israel, I actually got to see her and Alana at the Jerusalem Open House, which was hosting kind of a new program to help women of trans experience be able to kind of control and feminize their voice. So we're going to be speaking about all of these issues. But first, Sharon, thank you so much. And maybe give us a little bit of a professional introduction of who you are and how the Jerusalem Open House found you.
Sure. Thank you for the eulogy, Rabbi Mike. I am a speech therapist, and I've been working, when I lived in Richmond for 10 years, I worked in hospitals, I worked in rehab, I worked in acute care. And when I came to Israel, I opened up my own clinic and I started teaching. I came to Israel in 2004. And I started teaching in a whole bunch of BA and MA programs for speech therapy. And one of the courses that I teach is a voice disorders course. And I got very, very interested. My specialty is swallowing disorders, but voice disorders, motor speech disorders, anything that has to do with the adult neurogenic side of things. And I love learning new things and working with special populations. I'll give you an example of a special population not related to this class, just so you know, like how I ended up coming into the voice feminization world. A special population is like swallowing anxiety, people who have anxiety, and then it kind of expresses itself in, I feel like I'm choking when I'm eating, or even more specifically, pill swallowing. So that's like a special population. And then maybe 6-7 years ago, the Israeli Organization for Speech Therapists advertised that they were having a day class in Tel Aviv in the Pride Center on voice feminization. And I thought, I'm 100% going to that. That sounds amazeballs. And I went looking like this to the Pride Center on a Friday, and 3 different people who were very nice and very helpful, but 3 different people said, "Can I help you? Are you lost? What are you looking for?" Because you're obviously not going into the Pride Center with a hat and looking like, a religious person. And I said, "I'm looking for the course on voice feminization." They're like, "Okay, come on in." Even when I was there, it was amazing day-long course, like very practical, not pie in the sky. It was like really the first part, which was educational for me, was about what is the difference between the gender that you're assigned at birth, the gender that you identify with as the gender that you're attracted to, the gender that you present as. It was really, really a great opening topic. And then after the opening speech, they put out this gorgeous buffet, like a really, really tempting buffet. And I went to the first speaker, who was himself transgender, female to male. And the first thing that I said was, my first language is English. So if I make a mistake on the pronouns, it's because my Hebrew is not first language, not because being disrespectful or ignoring. So like, excuse me, you'll hear plenty of mistakes in Hebrew. And the second thing that I said was, is this kosher? Because it looks really good. And this guy said, I can't believe it. We just gave an hour and a half lecture on being accepting and being open for everyone and being accessible for everyone. And it didn't even occur to us for a moment that somebody who keeps kosher would show up. And he got so emotional and upset with himself. He says, there's a kosher McDonald's half a kilometer away from him. I'm going to run over. And I'm like, I brought lunch. Like, I had no expectation that it would be kosher, but it just looked good. So like, everything is okay. But it was like an eye-opening moment in every direction. Okay, I'm gonna be quiet and let Alana, you introduce yourself.
It's fantastic. It's so fantastic. So Alana was in your class at the Jerusalem Open House, and I got to meet her over the summer, over the last trip briefly. So Alana, we got to speak a little bit before everybody joined us, and you have a fascinating story. So maybe a little bit of background of who you are, and then about your experience in coming to this class.
Sure. So, hi everyone. My name is Alana, and I'm a transgender woman. I'm living in Jerusalem. I came out, just a bit of a backstory. I came out as a transgender woman just almost a year ago or something like that. I'm a student at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem for linguistics and the Hebrew language. And I specifically came to Sharon's class because I felt quite insecure with my own voice, which is something that a lot of transgender people go through, whether they're male to female or female to male. And it was a real eye-opener, well, ear-opener. It really made me much more comfortable with my own voice and gave me a lot of tools in order to be more comfortable, to be more confident in my own voice and my own body. So it was a very excellent experience, and Sharon is an amazing teacher.
Yeah.
Here's a 50. Thanks.
Yeah, I think it does. You don't have to know her well to know how positive her energy is, and how wonderful she is as a teacher. So I'm curious, for those who don't know, Hebrew is a gendered language. And so when a person speaks Hebrew, really from the very beginning of a sentence, it's easy to tell over your gender without having to say, my pronouns are he, him, or she, her. I'm curious, as people in America think about the space of the genderqueer community and expanding, Alana, as somebody who studies linguistics, what does Israel or Hebrew present in terms of support or challenges for folks who are not going to stick into the binary of the male female gendered language?
Well, in that regards, the Hebrew language does pose a significant challenge because there is no a neutral way. There is no neutral way that a non-binary person may use. It's all either masculine or feminine. So there are some workarounds. People are trying to get off the ground. Unfortunately, they haven't really won a widespread support, though some movements, for example, the multi-gender Hebrew, which is basically specifically in written form, allows for both feminine and masculine forms to be written at the same time, with a slight modification of the Hebrew script. And that is a real positive move to a brighter future for all of us. Yeah.
I'll say from my perspective, Rabbi Mike, that's one of the things that we took advantage of in the voice feminization class. It really shouldn't be called voice feminization. It's like speech feminization. What makes a person be perceived as female? But one of the things is a semantic marker is that we can take advantage in Hebrew of identifying yourself as female by starting a sentence and saying, like instead of "it's nice to meet you," say "I am glad to meet you," which already sounds female, like "ani smecha," or like "I am calling you," "ani mitkasheret," or "ani tzricha," I need, like on the announcing. that I'm female, because a lot of the women in the class had said that the phone is so challenging that immediately someone responds to them as male, and then the whole conversation, they're like trying to get back the footing of like, listen, I'm telling you I'm female. Maybe my voice doesn't sound to you, female perceived, but so we can take advantage of that and like let person know at the beginning, and then you're like listening, you're listening to a female, even like, you know what I mean? There's this comedian, there's this, I think he's Irish comedian, who takes all these songs, like old Michael Jackson songs or whatever, and then he tells you what the lyrics are that he heard, and then he plays it, and then you hear his lyrics, even though you know the song so well. And I feel like that if you start the conversation ani tzricha, then that's it, you're in, right? So it's dafka, like it actually is something that we'll use to our advantage that I'm kind of missing when we do the English class.
It is fascinating how you're able to take something that poses a challenge and kind of harness it for something constructive to kind of, sometimes the best defense is a good offense of taking charge and letting the other know your gender. I'm curious, when I think about a female voice, a male voice, it's not something that I think of that a voice has a gender, right? There's a person who has a gender identity and they speak, and so their sounds. There's certainly things that sound more feminine and more masculine that I think are maybe less of a social construction than others. But I think there's a lot that has to do with the way in which society expects men to speak and society expects for females to speak. So I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about the balance that you're able to strike with not encouraging, kind of perpetuating things which aren't necessarily so good in society about the ways in which men and women are supposed to speak differently, but also are empowering to help people be perceived as the way in which they identify.
Okay, I hear you. There's two separate things. One is, what can we harness in order for a person to change how they're perceived, which is really 7 things, which we go through in the course. The first 5 are the subsystems of speech, which is respiration, breathing, phonation, which is the voice, resonance, which is basically the shape and size of the cavity that the air travels through, articulation, and then prosody, which is like the music of speech. Those are the 5 speech things. And there's a lot of parameters within each subsystem that we can manipulate. And then there's what you mentioned, the semantic markers, right? Ani tzricha, hello, I'm a woman, right? Or also non-speech markers, like women tend to have much more eye contact even when they're speaking, meaning almost everybody has good eye contact when they're listening to someone. But a lot of men, when they're speaking, they can go anywhere, which is okay. But a woman, when she's speaking, she's more dialed in. So that's like the framework of what we're working with. And within each subsystem, like I said, there's a lot of things we can do in terms of not perpetuating some, let's say not great social constructs. I'm going to say like this. The way that I think of, and the way that I try to present in the class, is that there's a buffet of a ton of options. Last night we went to my nephew's wedding. There's an excellent buffet. There was a huge buffet of, let's say, 5 subsystems plus 2 other things, and in each one a bunch of options, and that each person chooses from the buffet what makes their voice sound like them, like their identity. And Ilana, who is one of the funniest people and so intelligent, when I said as an assignment on the second class, we have an assignment that each person has to come up with someone famous that they can bring a YouTube video of that represents the voice or the speech that they would like to have. It doesn't have to be like, I want to sound exactly like this person, but like something in their speech and in their voice appeals to me. And that's what I'm kind of aiming for. Alana, who did you pick?
I picked AOC.
Good choice.
That's Ilana. That's classic Ilana. And somebody else chooses Betty Boop, and somebody else chooses Ariana Grande, and somebody else chooses the famous Israeli singer. And everybody is choosing who they want to sound like, right? It's not like I'm trying to get each person to have this particular cookie cutter feminine voice, or my voice, 49-year-old woman, my height and however many pounds. No, it's the voice that you want to sound like. Here's the tools that we can use to make us reach that voice. So I think that it's not really my job, and I wouldn't tell somebody what to do. Like nobody's going to tell me what to choose at the buffet, right?
Right. Beautiful. It's really fantastic. And AOC is a wonderful choice, Alana. I actually heard her speak one time in person, and she's a fantastic speaker. I'm curious if you're willing to share, Alana, of all of the things that Sharon mentioned, what was particularly a struggle, and maybe what came more easy? And I'm curious if you're willing to share about the process. How much of that has become kind of reacculturated that now it's natural, and are there still things that you have to be much more conscious and present with?
Well, I would say definitely that resonance was a challenge and still is a bit of a challenge. More specifically, though, pitch. It's still a bit problematic. It's still work in progress, but the rest of the features that Sharon mentioned, specifically all the semantic markers, they came quite naturally to me, so I didn't have much of a problem with those. I would say that I would like to say though that when I came out as transgender around a year ago, it was actually very baffling to me. How should they sound? How should they speak? Suddenly, I felt that I have lost my confidence in speaking with people and speaking with strangers. It was a very confusing. It was very confusing to me because I'm usually quite, well, some would say a loudmouth.
You're the life of the party, Alana. That's what I would say. That's the laugh. That's the laugh, Rabbi Mike.
It's a great laugh.
Yeah.
It's a great laugh.
And suddenly, the only thing that I knew how to like feminize myself was somehow to make myself smaller, more meek. And I just lost confidence in talking in classes and talking with people on the streets and with salespeople. So that really changed with Sharon's class. I became much more confident and in my own body with my own voice, and it helped me a lot.
It's such holy work. And I'm sure you and the other students in the class learned a lot about yourself through this. And Sharon, I'm curious if you'd be willing to share what you learned as the teacher, as like somehow kind of getting exposure to kind of the internal struggles of members of the trans community that was probably very new for you.
Okay, I'll tell you two quick stories. I came in the first night and I said, open mind, open mind, open mind. Because you're right, in my regular social life, I live in a yeshuv, right? Where like everybody's kind of like me. Some people are English speakers, some people are Hebrew speakers, but like, you know, they're my age, they keep Shabbat, you know. I do have, you mentioned before, in my work life, the guy who's going to teach the classes with me is a gay man, Shani. We've been working together for years. He was my student in university. And at the end of the semester, I'm like, tell me when you graduate, give me a call. And then he did. And then we hired him. But I can't say that I know of any transgender people in my social life that before this group. So the first night, I don't know, Rabbi Mike, if I told you this story, the first night of the class, Alana, there was a woman who came, and then Ilana came, and I think maybe a third woman came, and then we started the group and we're meeting each other. And then this Haredi, like ultra-Orthodox man comes in, looks just like you, like in terms of what you're wearing, Rabbi Mike, right? With the hat and the beard and the black black suit and the long side locks and everything. And I'm thinking, how did this guy get in here? You have to have a code to get in. Like, and I said, can I help you? And he said, yeah, I'm looking for the class. And I said, voice feminization. And he said, yeah. And I said, Kanes, come in. And he says, Kansi, like I should address him female. And I'm like, right off the bat, I just made like a stupid mistake, and I really apologized. But I exactly went for the easy, oh, you're presenting in your dress male, but of course she presented male. She left her community, and that's how she left. By the second class, she came dressed as her female identity, and she said she felt that she was living 2 lives, 2 phones, 2 names, 2 accounts of everything. And that's it. From that moment, we knew her as herself. And you met her.
Yeah, sure.
And then there is another woman who I super admire. I feel that one of the things that happened in the class for me, it was such a learning experience for me. It was tremendous. But to learn about the bravery, first of all, Alana, when I met you, I was sure that you had been living as a transgender woman for like 6-7 years. And then you told me when you transitioned, I'm like, what now? I mean, I could not believe it. And also, Mike, a lot of the things that I heard again and again and again and again during the class was that people were saying, this pandemic is horrible, but there's some silver linings. One of the silver linings is that I wear a mask and I can dress as I dress. I can leave the house for the first time dressed as a woman, which I didn't feel that I had the ability to do that before. It was amazing. I kept hearing that over and over. But one of the women in the group told me that when she was younger and she was living as a man, I said, you're so brave. You're so brave. She said, you think it's a coincidence that we're brave? She says, anybody who's in this room who's living as a transgender life is brave. She says, you know what I did when I was a young man? I was on the police squad, on the bomb squad. That's what her job was. She was on the bomb squad. She said, I have been brave from the moment that I was on this planet. I came in being brave and fighting, and now I'm living my life. And I'm like, whoa. Yeah, amazing.
It's very powerful. I'm curious, as in America, like we've made some progress, and unfortunately there's some states here, it's heading in the wrong direction quickly. What are your observations, maybe Alana first, of like the progress that's happening in Israel? So much of Israel in our communities are influenced by Judaism, and I'm curious if, do you see the culture of the Jewish communities offering something that's actually supportive and helpful, and like where are those kind of edges of change in good spaces that you've identified?
Well, I would say that there is change. It's slowly happening, but as any place, change is inevitable. There's a lot more of trans visibility, whether it's in sports, even, especially here. A very famous case a few weeks ago. There was a soccer referee that came out as trans, Sapir, and she continued working as a soccer referee, and she made a lot of headlines. In general, we see a lot of much more visibility for the trans community here, and things are progressing to a much better place. Even in Jerusalem, I can see that there is, even though it's a very conservative city and it's not as liberal as Tel Aviv, for example, but still there is a lot of good progress happening everywhere.
It's so encouraging. And one of the things that this is kind of in response to is that the government has shifted its posture towards, supplementing and providing support for the trans community. Sharon, could you speak to that a little bit?
So the Minister of Health is from the LGBTQ plus community. And apparently there's a very strong LGBTQ plus lobby in Israel. And so changes were made to the most recent basket of health, like the socialized services that are free for citizens here, to include a budget of 2 million shekel for transgender voice therapy. Just for that, not for any other service, 2 million shekel for that. And it was the way that they described how important it is that they said that if there's a transgender person who is not speaking with the voice that they identify with, then they can suffer from gender dysphoria. And then the transgender voice therapy, if it's feminization or masculinization, is considered a life-saving therapy. And that's how it was included. Like, I have chills telling you that. Like, go Israel, really go Israel. And there were other things that were included. Alana, PrEP was included.
Yes, also PrEP.
And also that same-sex couples can do surrogacy, which Shani, who's going to lead the classes with me, he and his husband came to America to have their first child, who is absolutely gorgeous. He sent us this morning a Perm picture of her dressed up. Oh, she's so cute. But Bezrat Hashem, their next child here, and not part of this decision, but not totally unrelated, conversion therapy is illegal in Israel. Go Israel.
Yeah. I'm traveling on Thursday to a conference in England that's looking to ban conversion therapy, and it's, even though things are illegal, right, that doesn't mean that they don't happen. So there's still definitely work to do, but it's an amazing thing that Israel's taking the lead on this and modeling, safe and healthy supportive practices. I wanted to also give people an opportunity to ask questions. If you want to write any sort of question and put it into the chat here as we continue, I'm happy to ask questions if you have any. And I'm also wondering, within your religious community, Sharon, are you seeing a movement within, Orthodoxy of greater, we think about, tolerance and acceptance and celebration at different points along the spectrum. Where I've been to your home, your beautiful home, and within your particular community, is there any sort of representation? Is there a shift in terms of tolerance and acceptance?
I think maybe 5 years ago, maybe 4 years ago, the first time that I remember seeing in the Daf Maytav, which is like the bulletin board of the community, but like a little newspaper that comes out every week, that they were having a chug bayit, like a home parlor meeting, right? Like an old-timey parlor meeting, to support teenagers who are religious and part of the Pride community. And first of all, I'm like, wow, kol hakavod, like go this community, but also that it was in the Daf Maytav, meaning it wasn't like just like a quiet thing that people told, but like it was right in there. And the rabbi of the yeshuv, the rav of the yeshuv, gets to veto stuff if he feels that there's something like, let's say, too edgy. And there it was. So I would say yes. I'm not going to say that there's a pride parade outside my street. There isn't. But I mean, obviously there's people in the pride community who, like the kids, let's say, maybe the adults who move here, there's no same gender families in the yeshuv. But also to live where we live, it's considered a Shomer Shabbat community. a woman can wear whatever she wants, a man can wear whatever he wants, but like you can't drive around on Shabbat in the community. So there's not yet a same-sex couple that moved in, but there's certainly kids who I mean, of these families.
It's an amazing thing. It's very exciting, and I think it's just a matter of time till it continues. Ben, I see your hand is up, and I love the background, particularly for this conversation.
Thank you. I'm speaking to you from Los Angeles. That's the background. Thank you very much for this presentation and for talking to us about this. It's very eye-opening. I do have a couple of questions and comments. You're helping me be a little more comfortable with what I first came with, a disturbing feeling that why would someone want to sound like something else? Aren't you trying to find your own voice, not trying to mimic someone else's voice? I also am concerned about stereotypes. So I'm not being funny here, but I'm just wondering if someone were to want to sound more like a man, maybe all they need to do is interrupt more. Men are, that is a stereotype of the way men speak. So are you also dealing with questions like this? One of the things that occurred to me when you first started was the concept of being heard. I had never thought of that before, but not only are you talking about voice and speech, but this is you yourself inside being heard by others. It's an amazing eye-opener for me, and I love it.
I think that's great. I should put that in the class, that for the masculinization class, that we should interrupt more. But 100%, there's certain things that don't necessarily have to do with the pitch of your voice, or don't necessarily have to do with any of those subsystems that we talk about that are perceived as more male or more female. Like, let's say uptalk. My name is Sharon. I'm a speech therapist. That's so female. And not that every female does that, but it's perceived if somebody does it as more feminine. Is that great? It's not great. In fact, in the class, there were some women who said, like, there was a woman who said, I want to sound like this. And somebody's like, ich, frecha. Like, that sounds like, how do you say frecha, Ilana? I don't know if we can use that word.
It's, yeah. Why would why would you want that? Yeah.
I don't know. It's like a valley girl. Why would you want to sound like that? But if that's what somebody wants to sound like, okay.
It's pretty good.
Whatever. That's not my choice. That's your choice, right? You fill up your plate at the buffet.
Yeah. Alana, what are your thoughts on this in terms of there must be a process of exploration that it's impossible to know who a person's growing into and realizing the actualization of oneself until you start experimenting and exploring and figuring out what resonates and what feels authentic. How much trial and error is there in this for you?
Well, I can speak only for myself, and specifically the entire process was just to get myself as the most comfortable I can be inside my own voice. Obviously, I don't do all stereotypical feminine gestures and features that can be. I don't speak like a teen valley girl from Azusa. So it's just life is a process of exploration, constant exploration, and this is not an exception.
And there were people who didn't like everything that I presented in the class was, let's try this, right? Here's a neutral sentence. Let's try this and see how it sounds, right? And some people were like, ich, like, I don't want that. So don't do that, or like you had mentioned, Alana, that the resonance is tough or changing the pitch is tough. Not tzarich, like we don't have to do that. There's not a mitzvah that says you've got to use this recipe, right?
Yeah.
So yes, some people definitely had different goals of what they wanted to sound like, how they wanted to be perceived, because that's who they identified as. In fact, I'm going to give a class, hopefully also with Alana at some point at one of the colleges that I teach at, and it's going to be on Zoom. And I was thinking that I wanted to start with my video off and just start speaking and have them say, you know, like if I did like this, like what kind of generalizations would you make about me? If you hadn't met me yet and you were just listening to my voice, would you think, how old am I? What's my socioeconomic status? What's my education? Where am I from? Am I cisgender? Am I heterosexual? Am I whatever? But then it turns out that the group that I'm going to be speaking to is my current students. So I ruined it. But for next year, maybe they won't know me yet by the time I give that class.
I think it's so powerful, right? Acknowledging the prejudices that we bring, right? We see somebody and we make all sorts of assumptions. The person standing next to you in that picture is your husband, who also happens to be like a massive Talmud Chacham, a real scholar and author of Svarim. And you see somebody wearing shorts.
Yeah, I don't think he looks necessarily like that. This was in Kenya on safari. By the way, Mike, I had to change this picture. I do supervision for master students in speech therapy, like we do Zoom sessions. And one of the programs that I teach in is an ultra-Orthodox program. There was a picture of me and Svi, my husband, of the past almost 30 years. Bezrat Hashem in the summer will be 30 years at our daughter's wedding. And my husband was giving me a kiss on the cheek. 30 years we've been married. I think it's okay if you give me a little kiss on the cheek. And we look really nice. And the supervisor of the program told me, you have to switch your picture, which is what I switched it to, because it's not tsanua, it's not modest. I'm like, listen, lady, this isn't, my boyfriend. This is my husband.
My husband.
So I changed it. I'm like, whatever. It makes you upset. It's offensive to somebody. I'll change it. That's why we have this chaste picture of Tzvi in Nairobi or wherever it was. In shorts, yeah, but right. If you looked at him, would you think he's a rabbi? He has a doctorate. He writes books. He just looks like dude.
He looks like a tourist, right? And I think that what's so powerful is that we make all sorts of assumptions based on the most superficial and external and insignificant aspects of a person, right? Those shorts, that outfit, anyone can pick up anywhere, and it's not an indicator of goodness or of anything particular. And I also, what resonated when you were talking about like the exploration and you're trying something on, or trying something out, it's such a universal piece, right? You even see this in the Midrashim about God. God wanted like this and tried this, and it wasn't exactly right. So God tried like this, and then like this landed. And we all go to the store, we all pick things out, we put it on. I'm like, I don't like the way this feels. I don't like the way this looks. It's not my color. It's not my thing, right? I noticed Sharon, you've got multiple colors, fingernail polish, right? It's very elegant.
I'm thinking of doing blue and pink for when we start the classes, but I don't want to, like culturally appropriate, but
it's tricky, right? And
in the meantime, I have a Purim thing. I have like little masks for Purim over here.
It's very good. It's very good. But on the theme of Purim, right? There's a role that clothing plays in either concealing or revealing a person's identity. And sometimes we want to be perceived a certain way. It's actually a way of hiding other aspects of ourselves. And to be able to vertically integrate the way in which a person presents in terms of dress and also voice, it's very, very powerful. And I also just wanted to reflect that, in the exploration of what is really essential about gender and masculinity, interrupting another person is not essential, but I think certainly is a cultural piece. But one of the things that many people have observed is that for some people that have transitioned, particularly from male to female, being that it's not essential, it's not an essential component of gender, and it really is just a social construction, some of that comes along with it. And then you'll find really interesting observations, particularly around people of color, right? If a person transitions, male, female, to going from what is often perceived as the most threatening person on the street to being perceived as being invisible, right? Or the exact opposite, where a person is female to male, nobody would ever listen to a person, right? And now all of a sudden, like there's threatening and they're constantly, people are focused on their presence because they feel intimidated. And what that means even for women of color white women who have transitioned male to female, to be aware of, well, as a man, I'm speaking and you're listening, but to the other women in the room, you're not listening and they're saying the exact same things. So there is a sensitivity that I think for people who perpetuate these stereotypes and make all these assumptions, like we're not conscious of it, particularly speaking for myself as a straight cis male and the space that I occupy, even thinking about how do I want to be perceived? I don't want to be perceived as misogynistic. I don't want to be perceived as, that itself is already work of like, oh, so maybe I shouldn't interrupt people. Maybe I shouldn't take all the space. And so I think this is helpful for everybody to hear because it's part of being a good human. And I'm curious, Sharon, for you in particular, like how has this work more broadly about being conscious of speech affected like more mundane aspects of your life? And I think you even mentioned something to me about one of your daughters in the army.
Oh yeah.
So about speech and yeah.
So I have a bunch of kids, and one of my daughters, I just told Rabbi Mike and Ilana right before, and Jesse, that well, I have two sets. Sort of complicated. I have two sets of twins, biological, and then we have two Ethiopian kids that we fostered, adopted, whatever. But of my younger set of twins, one of them tonight, right now, mamash, like just moments before we started, she got her second, Alana, how do you say Aaron? She got her second, whatever you call it here, badge. And she's now a lieutenant. She's a combat lieutenant in the Israeli army. And she can kill you with her bare hands. She's very feminine, gorgeous curly hair. She likes to curl her eyelashes. She has a gun basically as big as she is. But when she speaks with us, she sounds like herself. And when she gets her army phone calls all day and all night, she's like, Ken, Manishma, she immediately goes into this like tough, male perceived, she goes into a lower pitch. Well, she changes really. I told her, Adina, wow, you're like changing all the subsystems of speech without even knowing it, like to make yourself tough. And it's totally subconscious to the point where I told her twin sister, like, just film her when she's on the phone because she doesn't know she does this. Just show her, like, you know, Adina army, Adina regular life. But yeah, that's right. I forgot about that. I would also say that, Alana, when you said that you're like trying things out, like, let's see how it is, that I think people who move to Israel who are not native Hebrew speakers, they consider for 2 minutes, should I speak with an Israeli accent? And I thought for a minute, especially with such a horrible name, Sharon Ron, if I want to use, there's so many reshes in there, if I want to sound like Sharon Ron, right? But I thought the expectation of my Hebrew is excellent. I mean, I teach in university in Hebrew. It's not bad, but it's not perfect. And I thought if I use an Israeli accent, the expectation is going to be that my Hebrew should be perfect. And then when I make a mistake, it's going to be like, what's with her? So like, keep the expectations as they are. Like, I'm American, I make a mistake, it's all good. So yeah, there is some trying. I tried it for like, I'm going to say like 6 minutes to do the Israeli accent. And then I'm like, nope, no good.
Yeah. It's so fascinating to think about how universal these struggles of I want to be authentic, and I also, going to Israel and making Aliyah, like I want to be able to identify as that which I am, which is Israeli, and part of doing that is that it should code that way for people. And there's some tension of like, well, the most authentic version of myself is this, and it codes as this to some. And trying to navigate like those competing interests of, and there's a lot of code switching and a lot of the work that a lot of us do, right? If we're speaking in a professional capacity, we can use a certain language of people who do this all day long. My Hebrew is not only is it not excellent, it's probably not Hebrew according to most. It's very yeshivish and it's got a very heavy accent. And I almost refuse to speak in Hebrew in Israel because it does not helpful. So I'm also curious about, to Ilana, in trying to figure out, right, the best way to kind of project to the world. Have you discovered things about yourself that were surprising or shocking, that had you just been able to be out in the world without having to be so conscious, you wouldn't necessarily have identified?
Well, I could say that it wasn't just only specifically with the voice therapy with Sharon, but just in general, going through the process, it made me much more comfortable with time in my own body, with my own voice. One of the reasons I was able to come out of the closet as a transgender woman is because of a very supportive environment in my university. The linguistics department is very supportive. Apparently, it's a hotbed for queer people, and in general for very supportive people. And I just felt very safe, and I was able to do that. Something that I wasn't able to do in previous years. And in general, it just been a very long process, and to just be myself, be my authentic self, even if I'm sometimes a loudmouth.
No, it's so inspirational. I want to let everybody know that this is obviously being recorded, but it's also going to be available, in particular, for those who are watching this and close to this date. Sharon is offering a new set of classes, which is going to be starting. Sharon, maybe speak a little bit about what it entails and how people can get in touch with you, and what the motivation and what they can expect from such a thing, who might benefit from it.
So we're opening up classes first for voice feminization in English, starting April 3rd. And also in Hebrew starting April 24th. And then later on, maybe in another couple of months, voice masculinization, Zrat Hashem, I hope. It's going to be on Zoom, which I like. There's advantages and disadvantages of doing things in person. But one of the disadvantages I found in the class at the Jerusalem Open House is that not everybody can come to every session, right? You have things going on in your life and you miss it. And then if you missed it, you missed it, right? And if it's on Zoom, then we can record it. You can have a password. Nobody else can access it except you, and you haven't missed it, even if that night you have, something going on. So we want to have small groups, 6 to 12 people on Zoom, where we're going to have an 8-week course for male to female transgender, wherever you are during your transition, early, late, whatever. And it's going to be very, very interactive. It's not like lecture, blah, 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 me. It's going to be, here's a principle, let's practice it. Here's a thing, let's play with it. Let's try it. Let's give feedback. And a WhatsApp group to go along with it, so that people can send in their homework and, comment on each other and, share their WhatsApp videos or excellent apps. Like one of the women in the group, 2 of the women in the group actually told me about an app that I didn't know about that was so great for practicing what you sound like. And then it kind of shows up on the screen, just in terms of pitch, not in terms of any other parameter of your voice, but it shows up either blue, which is a male perceived pitch, like a certain amount of hertz, and then a genderless zone, and then a female perceived pitch. So we have the Zoom classes, we're going to have the WhatsApp group to go along with it, and really excited. In terms of reimbursement, the people who live in America are going to have to tell me what is reimbursable, but I do have an active American license. In terms of Israel, hopefully this will be either totally or partially reimbursable, either by the Kupat Cholim, like the health services, or possibly by other gormim, other groups. So we're very, 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 very excited about this. And it's going to be me and Shani, who works with us. And I just think it'll be super, super exciting. Also, for me personally, most of the week, I'm working with a certain population. Like I work with geriatric, neurogenic, very, very ill people, stroke, dementia, Parkinson's, a lot with ALS, even though it's not a common disease, but we have a contract with the ALS organization. There's also anybody in the greater area that has this illness comes to us, and those are very, very heavy things, a lot of head and neck cancer. So to work with the transgender community, it's like, yay, it's a nice, bright spot in the week, like healthy people, and like young people and Ilana people who are so fun to be around. I find you to be, Alana, so crazy intelligent, so interesting to talk to, so fun. I mean, like, it's just like, how could you not look forward to that? I'm like, oh, Mondays is the best day. Mondays are so fun. So like, that's for me a bright spot also. Not that I don't like my older, neurogenic illness people. I do. But they also break my heart a lot. And I love to see them getting better, but it's nice to have also just something young and exciting and energetic and different.
Well, we can feel the energy. It's very exciting. And I'm curious, Alana, if you have any advice for people who are thinking about doing this and maybe are a little bit hesitant or feel a little bit insecure, what kind of reassurances or advice could you give people who are contemplating this and trying to figure out if it's for them?
Well, I think in the first place, there's really nothing to lose. It's just a very fun experience. Trying to find your authentic self, and it's something, this self-discovery journey that all of us are on, not just transgender people. It's something, it's a unique opportunity to find your true self, whether it's through Voice with Sharon or through any other thing that you might come up with.
It's really fantastic. I think about allyship in the Jewish context as being a chaver, as being an ally, and it's a language of chibur. It's about connectivity. It's the vav chibur. It's the mechuber l'karka. And Israel and the Jewish community has tremendous resources, and it also has tremendous needs. And this is just such an amazing shidduch between the needs and the resources that it's the, when you're part of a community, so you support each other, you attach yourself to the community and provide for one another. And it's so amazing to hear about all of the wonderful gifts that Sharon, you've received, and it's super obvious that you have gifts to be able to give. And when the world works properly, I think this is what that looks like, right? Where everybody feels like they're the lucky one. Everyone feels like they're getting the better end of the arrangement and of the partnership. And it's such an amazing model of allyship that although it's in a professional capacity, I mean, it's clearly a spiritual experience for you, and the way in which it affects people who otherwise feel like they can't be healthy and out as who they are. It's life saving, and not just getting people to one side of the brink of that, but it's also it's the quality of life, right? It's being able to live, being able to be heard and seen and understood, and being able to feel comfortable with oneself. And so, if you have any final words, I'd love to give you a couple more minutes if you have anything else that you'd like to share, or any other last reflection.
You know what I loved seeing, Alana? At the end of every class was supposed to be an hour. And I would tell my husband, because you know where it's located, the Jerusalem, it's terrible parking, absolutely terrible. Center of the city, impossible. So even though I'm the driver in the family, I would say to Tzvi, just drive in, go see some old student, have a good time, drop me off, pick me up, and make my life a little bit easier. So I would tell Tzvi, the class starts, I forgot what time, like let's say 8:00, come pick me up at 9:10. We'll have a little discussion afterwards. And inevitably, he would be waiting in the car until like 9:45 because we would be talking. And because I felt that there was a lot of chemistry between the participants. And there were some times where I thought, okay, I'm going to leave because I want them to feel comfortable to talk amongst themselves. There was a woman in the class who was going through transition who was, I think she was 15, Alana. She was really young.
Yeah.
And she said she was going to go to the beach with her friends. And she had so much anxiety about it. What do you wear? And what do you do? And how do you do? And one of the other women in the group who's close to 50, or maybe she's already 50, she's like, come, let me tell you everything. Like, let me give you a hug and let me tell you how it goes. And this is where you buy a bathing suit. And this is the type of bathing suit. And this is what you do. And I'm going to get you through it, honey. Don't worry. And I thought that was such a great thing, which had nothing to do with the class that I was running. But there was such a cohesiveness that was so nice. That was so nice. Like that happens all the time. Like if you're, in Europe pre-corona, you're going around with your family, and like when we go to visit places, inevitably we speak Hebrew, right? It's like the secret language. And then down the street, wherever you are, there's always some other family speaking to be like, hey, manishma, right? And all of a sudden you're best friends because like you're the only two people in, I don't know, Slovenia who are speaking Hebrew, in this cave. And I feel like there's some like, I recognize you. Oh my God. I've been through that, or can you help me through that? I'm about to go through that. And I thought that was so nice. Same thing that I would see if I would run, a laryngectomy group, like people who've had their larynx removed from laryngeal cancer. Like we've been in the trenches together, we're connected. And I love that aspect. So Svi was like, so you're saying pick you up at 9:10, but you actually mean 9:40, right? That's what you're saying. That's how I'm translating it. And I'm like, you come when you come. I don't want to make you wait, but yeah. And a lot of times you guys would go, one of the women would say, come, let's go to Machane Yehuda, let's go get a coffee, let's whatever. I just thought that was so nice.
Yeah, community is really important because it's not good to be alone. Alana, any final thoughts before we say goodbye today?
I just wanted to say that it was really a wonderful journey, and I'm so thankful for Sharon for giving us this opportunity that allowed all of us to basically be our authentic selves and give us the tools that we need to be ourselves and to be comfortable in our own skin and in our voice. And that's it.
It's so fantastic. I want to say thank you to Jesse and to CBST, and of course to Sharon and Alana for being here and sharing of your stories. And I know that after we posted a picture of us Sharon, with the trans flag it was a huge amount of people, reaching out, and it's really important work. And I'm sure not everybody was super thrilled, but my understanding is that there was much more love than anything else. And it's an amazing thing that there's a lot of work to be done, but it takes brave people like you to be able to normalize, destigmatize, to be able to support those, that can use this. And it's you're always an inspiration. You've always been an inspiration. And I'm going
to tell Tzvi to call you when I'm dead, so you'll come and talk. And we got to cover it. Yeah.
But I think that part of what I wanted to do in this conversation is to elevate, the story of you're an exceptional human, but this is also, it's a job, and you're showing up and you're being present, and you're really taking that which you bring to the world in a professional way, and you're elevating it from the mundane, from a vocation to really a holy offering. And it's so inspiring to bear witness to it. And thank you very much for being here and being
Thanks for the invitation, and right back at you, Rabbi Mike.
Fantastic. And also in the chat here, you can find more information how to reach out to Sharon, and feel free to share the information with anyone in the trans community who you think might be able to benefit from this.
Not necessarily Jewish, right? There's no Jewish content. We just happen to be in Israel, and both me and Shani are Jewish, but like there's no proselytizing. There's none of that. Yeah.
Wonderful. We're out of time, but thank you so much, and really looking forward to continuing the conversation in person. Mirz Hashem in Yerushalayim. Meir Avi Ameinu.
Amen.
Thank you so much, everybody.